You are tuned in to the Wendy Love Edge Show, where we don't dispense medical advice and all your health choices are your own. This is Season 5, Episode 19, sponsored by Caris Healthcare and the Relevant app. Let's talk about mushrooms, because I love mushrooms, all different types, and psilocybin has helped me too. And I think, when I was a kid, we mostly just saw the button white mushrooms, and I never really thought about how there is a wide range of mushrooms out there that can help us with various health and wellness issues. So I thought we should talk about it. Let's get started.
Got music and movies and friends and medicine. Yeah, is the show for me and you, the one you love to listen to. And ooh, you got your friends, see it through. See, 'cause laughter is medicine too. Said it's medicine too, babe.
Joining me now is Joy Lay, also known as GI Mary Jane. She is the founder of Platoon 420 and head of Coalition for the Libertarian Party Psychedelic Caucus. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Wendy. Thanks for having me again. It's great to be here.
Yes, it's been a long time, actually.
Yeah.
So I'm so glad that you're back. And the subject today is mushrooms. Really mushrooms in general, but then I wanted to specifically talk about psilocybin because I know that many people are finding good results for a number of things with psilocybin, and I understand that you're one of them.
Absolutely. And, I want to say long before legalization started, because it's really slow. We have Oregon, Washington, and small cities that are popping up with programs. And in a lot of those cities, the legislation isn't passed, but the programs haven't actually been launched. But I found great relief in psychedelics back in 2018, and rather unexpectedly. The only experience I had with psychedelics prior to that was, in the rave scene in the 90s, and it was a once in a while, try it for fun thing that never took on for me, right?
Right.
But in 2018, I had a tragic, unexpected loss. Partner of mine, Lenny LaRue, who was very active in the DC cannabis community, was caught with 2 grams of weed and ripped from his medication while he was in jail. And eventually it led to suicide. Now, as tragic as that is, it's strange because I've come to peace with it because of not just psychedelics, but of the breadcrumbs that he left, and psychedelics was one of those. So this was an unfortunate three chances. He tried 3 times, failed 2 times, and was successful on the 3rd. And I'm assuming that after the 2nd time, he was set in the decision that he had made and started laying out things for his family and loved ones and closing up books. So he passed. It was very tragic. I didn't leave my house for like a week and a half, 2 weeks. I even made a post on Facebook, please excuse my silence and respect it while I'm working through this.
Sure.
And when I finally crawled out of my bed 2 weeks later, went to my car and started cleaning it out, I found a pack of his cigarettes, which brought me to tears anyway. I mean, anything that reminded me of him at this point was hitting really hard. And I went to go throw it in the trash bag that I had. And I looked, and there was a little note inside the cigarette cellophane that said, "Don't throw me away." And I opened it up, and on top of the cigarette pack, it says, "You're going to need these." And there was an arrow pointing down. And inside the foil, the cellophane foil, were 4 tabs of acid. So LSD, for those who want the proper term.
Sure.
So I ended up retreating to the woods with my tents and my music and myself, and these 4 hits of acid over the course of 2 days, and came back with this crazy clarity and acceptance. Lenny suffered from schizophrenia, and what what the psychedelics made me realize is that as tragic and terrible as it was, that's often the end result for people with schizophrenia, especially because there's not a solid medical treatment for it.
Right.
I think psychedelics might be able to help, but we'll see in the future. But unfortunately, I came to terms with the fact that he was at peace. It was his decision. You know, we had the times we had, and it was able to calm me down.
How kind and understanding of him in his pain to think about you and think what might help, you know.
And I think it's because it helped him, maybe. You know, he experimented with a lot of street drugs, and I think that's because the prescription drugs weren't working or they were making it worse.
But
unfortunately,
side effects, unfortunately, with those drugs that they use for schizophrenia and other mental health issues. So yeah, I understand. So where did the psilocybin come in? Because
the psilocybin came in 2019, about a year later, when I had moved to Colorado from the East Coast and started getting active with a group called Veterans for Natural Rights. I think that they're still active. I hope so. But I started hearing stories from these veterans about the microdosing they were doing and how psilocybin is helping them. And again, the only experience that I had with psilocybin was maybe making some mushroom tea on the weekend with some friends. I never used it, to self-medicate, where when I was using cannabis illegally, it was to self-medicate, and I was aware of that in the moment because my body felt better. But it wasn't something that I felt with psilocybin, and likely because I didn't need it then. My body probably just didn't need it. So I had a fun evening, and that was it. My brain didn't want it anymore. But I got my hands on a bag of golden features in Colorado and started microdosing with them. And it led me to being more active in the gym, which is something that I had stopped doing after he passed. It led me to hiking again. It led me to living my life again and living it more than I did even before. I can't explain what the mushrooms did to calm me down and center me. I don't know what happens on a chemical level. But the best way to describe it is they kept me in the here and now. Right. Well, I didn't forget the past and other things around me that are going on that I need to focus on. I was able to understand that the here and now is what's important, and moving forward is what's important. And I did that. And eventually I just stopped using mushrooms. One day it was, something that my body didn't need.
I think that's true. So with natural medicine, I feel like that's so true. Like, with pharmaceuticals, it's like this ongoing, keep taking it. There's no end in sight, right? For many things that they treat with the pills. But with natural plants, your body kind of knows when it doesn't need it anymore. It's very interesting. I had that experience also with psilocybin where microdose, and it just kind of, in some way, makes everything look a little better and a little more accessible to get yourself to do what you need to do.
Yeah, things seem more hopeful. Like the bad things, you start to be able to see the silver linings in them all of a sudden. The yin to the yang, you start to understand that balance. And with that balance, I think gives you a release of fear and therefore a release of stress and an introduction or a reintroduction to the harmony that we all have inside. It's just, sometimes in life it peaks out, sometimes it doesn't.
Right.
Sometimes we need a little bit of help pulling it out. But to what you said about, nature, natural medicine doing that, I mean, it all does, right? Like you don't take vitamin C every day, but if you start feeling icky, you're like, oh, well, I need to start eating more oranges and start taking some vitamin C supplements. You're listening to your body. Right. Same thing, and I think a lot of women can relate with like PMS and cramps. Like we don't reach for chocolate just because our body craves the terpenes that are present in that chocolate. Yes. And this is something that, I mean, come on, we're human beings. We've survived for millions of years without pharmaceuticals. I'm pretty sure we can keep doing it,
Right.
If they would let it legally.
I'm so glad that that it helped you, that you were open to it, and that your friend left that trail for you to kind of start with the psychedelics. It sounds like, I mean, sure, when you're going to a rave, when you're growing, you know, a teenager or in your 20 something, that's a completely different thing. You know,
Yeah.
that's not about healing. It's about having a great time and, you know, partying with your friends.
Yeah.
So you had that door opened a little
And
bit.
I'd argue even that recreational use. I mean, me going and doing a couple hits of LSD on a Saturday or a Sunday night, let's say, I can wake up and go to work Monday morning without a hangover or any crazy side effects like alcohol, like this legal substance gives us. And is LSD for everybody? No. But for the people it is for, they should have that option to use it recreationally instead of alcohol. They should have the option to use ayahuasca or peyote or psilocybin or any of these natural medicines that we have out there.
Completely agree with you. So in your work with Platoon 420, you are telling stories from the drug wars, from the victim's perspective. And so I'd love to kind of tie that in a little bit with this. So, because cannabis was kind of the primary thing, but now we're talking about psychedelics and other drugs. Have you come across any stories with that?
Oh, yes. And actually, one's set to publish in a couple of days now about a huge psilocybin raid in Nevada, where it looks like two young 30-something couples that look like your next door neighbors were violently assaulted by the state for having a bin of mushrooms somewhere in their house. And that's why I report the way that I do. You have to consider if you're somebody that's just sitting in your car and you've got a bag of mushrooms in your ashtray, and some man walks up to you with a gun, some woman, and they tell you that if you don't get in the back of their car, they're going to use that gun against you. You just got kidnapped. Make no mistake about it. Mm-hmm. And so many people victimize themselves or criminalize themselves because of what they're used to seeing, and they ignore that they're the victims in these attacks. Mm-hmm. They didn't hurt anybody. So what I do is I will look for drug arrest and drug raid stories every day and reword them from the perspective of us, the victims. And I run across plenty of stories where there's violence involved. I try not to report on that, but even that breaks my heart because 9 times out of 10, those people get charged for the drug crimes, not the violent crimes. And we need to be charging them for the violent crimes that hold penalties that are, that are acceptable for what these people did. You cannot create a victim. You should not hurt another human being. If you do, you should pay your debt to society, and then you can get back out there. But, it happens in domestic violence charges all the time. Somebody beats their spouse, the cops come in, they find a bong on the table or a bag of mushrooms, and they both go to jail for drugs, and nobody ever gets charged with the violent crime. And it's terrible. It's absolutely terrible. So instead of arrest, I call it a kidnapping. I don't call it a raid. Mm-hmm. I call it a violent home invasion.
Sure.
I want to empower people to take back, their sense of self, that no, you are not a criminal for dabbling in nature. Even if you have firearms in your house, that doesn't make you a criminal because you have, the gun's not going to magically get more dangerous just because it's sitting next to a bag of weed, let's say.
Right.
The children are taken away from families because of this. You get child endangerment charges if they catch you with a kid just living in the house with a bag of weed. And this has got to stop. It's tearing families apart and destroying society.
I agree. And I'm really grateful for your work. I don't know how often you hear that, but I think that words and language is very important. And when you start to really tell it the way it is and not add the words that make society believe that what you're doing is okay and needed, right? Because that's kind of what they do with the stories. And so you're kind of taking it back and saying, well, wait a minute, those aren't the right words.
No.
And, what we say into the universe, what we say to other people, what we put on paper, magnifies.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It changes the way people think.
How can people get in touch with you?
If you go to platoon420.com, platoon420.com, all my contact information is there. You can find drug war news there. There's the Platoon 420 post exchange. There's an event tab that lets you know where I'll be. I'm traveling all over. I'm in my studio, my mobile studio right now, which is my van with a curtain, pretty flashy.
Looks great.
Yeah, hey, thanks. But yeah, I try to be all over the place. Wherever there's a need. Mississippi, most recently, I'm not sure if you heard what's going on down there, but 74% of Mississippi voters said yes to medical cannabis, and the Supreme Court told them they couldn't have it.
I saw that.
So we're going to run into these challenges with psychedelics. So I don't know. I just have this need to be there and really understand what's going on, because without being there, I don't understand. Like, I can't see how in this free country that I live in, my friends are going to jail for 20 years for having a plant, and they won't even smack their dog. You know, like, they're that not violent. So,
yeah.
But yeah, reach out. My phone number's on there, my email. I am so easy to get a hold of, and all the info is right on the website.
Excellent. Thanks so much for joining me. The Wendy Love Edge Show is sponsored in part by Caris Healthcare, the Relevant app, Purely Natural CBD, Highlands Residential Mortgage, Lit Premium Smoking Supplies, 131 Inclusion Gallery, and Alice CBD.